So, something I've noticed recently with Dead by Daylight is that a lot of the killers that are being released and a lot of the killers that are being reworked are being made to a level of strength that I think is very unhealthy for the game. Before I go into like a lot of detail in this video, I want to preface everything by just saying that I want this video to come across as me just being concerned about the health of the game. I know it probably won't. I know no matter what I say, this is probably just going to come across as me bitching or complaining or whatever. But really, genuinely, this entire opinion that I'm about to portray really comes from a place of me caring about Dead by Daylight and caring about its success and wanting the game to be a good, successful game that people can enjoy. But with that said, I think Behavior might need to take a good look at the strength levels of killers that they release, and really, they might need to really lab out how they play in like a 1v1 scenario to make sure that they're not oppressive in any way. And to explain exactly what I'm talking about here when I say oppressive, I'm talking about killers that when you're getting chased by them, they leave you with no reasonable option whatsoever to counterplay their chase. Examples of killers like this would be Spirit, Detzlinger, Pyramid Head, a good doctor player, and borderline you can say the same thing about Freddy, but Freddy's even kind of hit or miss. For instance, the best example I think is Spirit. Like if you're going against a Spirit player, I already made a whole video about this, but if you're going against a Spirit, you basically don't have any reasonable options yourself as a survivor. There's like little things that you can do to try to throw them off, like doubling back or being unpredictable, but generally speaking, if the Spirit appears on your face, you're just going to get hit, and nothing you can do can 100% prevent that every time. You don't really have a reasonable counterplay. And just to explain the reason why this is bad, because I know there's a lot of people, especially people that play mostly killer, that think that that is okay. That's how the game should be, because obviously the killer is like the one and the survivors are the four, and it's an asymmetrical game, so the killer should be able to basically kill the survivors without them being able to do anything about it, right? And don't get me wrong, I don't necessarily think that that's a bad argument. I think it's a decent argument. However, the game is a 1v4, and you kind of need people to enjoy playing the side of the 4. For instance, if Survivor becomes a completely unenjoyable experience, like if it keeps going down this road to the point where it becomes miserable, people might not be queuing for Survivor anymore. And we need 4 Survivor players for every 1 killer player for queues to be even remotely decent. And on top of that, it's definitely possible to make killers strong while also giving them reasonable counterplay. For instance, look at Hillbilly. Hillbilly is a perfect example of a killer that is very powerful but has perfectly reasonable counterplay as long as you can learn to play against it. There's many more examples of this too. Huntress is another fantastic example. I would even say Demogorgon is a killer that is very strong but has good reasonable counterplay. They've made a lot of really good design killers that are an absolute blast to play as and against, but there seems to be a pretty bad streak of killers right now that aren't. Let me show you some examples of exactly what I'm talking about. The most obvious one, and the one that people probably complain about the loudest, is Spirit. She has a power where when she goes into her ability, it looks the exact same as her just standing still. So very often you can just stand still and survivors can't tell what you're doing and will often just come right back to you. But then also at the same time, if they don't come right back to you and they decide to try to run away or do something else, it basically just requires the Spirit player to know what they're doing and be able to follow sounds, and they can just still appear right on top of their face and get the hit anyway. So you really are left with no options against the Spirit. You're basically just praying that they mess up, and if they don't mess up, then you get hit every single time. Another example would be Detzlinger. Because he can basically quickly ADS and shoot a projectile that goes about as fast as a fully wound hatchet from Huntress instantly at any point in time, basically means that he's a constant threat just by existing. You essentially have to be constantly juking when you're playing against him, and this will very often just get him free hits just by holding W, because you have to be constantly worried about his gun. This causes another damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, where if you try to juke his gun, you end up moving around too much and like letting him catch up and get a free M1 hit. But if you don't try to juke his gun, then he just shoots you and then gets a hit no matter what. So basically, no matter what you do, you end up getting hit unless the Slinger misses his shot. You're basically just praying that he misses his shot, and that's really all you can do. Even the new reworked Doctor kind of suffers from a lot of this as well, even though his isn't quite as bad, but it's still generally there. When you shock someone, they can't do anything for 2.5 seconds, so when you're looping him, he can just constantly shock you before you get to a pallet, and even if he shocks a little bit late and you miss times, you're still basically forced to drop it out of fear of him doing another loop, and then he can just meet you at the other side. If he does time it right, then he can literally just shock you every single time while you're looping around, and he catches up with every single shock. So eventually he catches up and hits you. It kind of leaves you with no real play other than just pre-throwing pallets, but then if you do that, then you'll run out of pallets super quickly. On top of the fact that pre-throwing pallets is just kind of a boring strategy because it doesn't really involve any play. It's kind of just a throw pallet, the killer kicks it, and move on to the next one. But even still, even with a pre-thrown pallet, a lot of the time the doctor can still get hits anyway if he just times his shock correctly. Every time you're about to get towards a vault, he just shocks and he slowly gains distance until eventually he can get a hit. So even in this situation, he's still pretty oppressive. And then we have the latest and probably, in my opinion, the worst culprit, which is Pyramid Head. This motherfucker can go 4.4 meters per second while he's using his power, and then at any point he can throw out a shockwave that goes through walls. So you get in a lot of situations against Pyramid Head where he can just stick a sword into the ground as you're coming up to a pallet, and if you throw the pallet, he just hits you with a shockwave, and if you don't throw the pallet, then he just picks up his sword and continues to chase you at full speed. This, again, just makes it so that chases just don't matter. No matter what you do, you get hit. If you're coming up to a window or pallet, as long as he's close to you, he sticks a sword in the ground. You either A, take it and get hit, or B, you try to fake it, and then you just pray that he messes up. But if he doesn't, you just get hit every time. There really is no play from the survivor at all. And that's not very, exciting or thrilling gameplay. Just to be basically, once the killer's close to you, you're just dead. It doesn't really matter what you do or what happens. You're just dead. So again, just to touch base on the whole argument of, well, it's a 1v4 and the killer should be strong. He should be this powerful. The survivors should be getting destroyed. While I sort of agree. I do agree that the killer should be strong, but they should be strong in a way that's fair. To give an example of someone like this, and anybody that watches me will not be surprised at all by this opinion, but I think Hillbilly is the perfect example of a killer like this. Hillbilly has a lot of tools in his kit that can help you down survivors, but everything that he can do has reasonable counterplay. And if the survivor knows what they're doing, they can get around it. For instance, curving can be avoided by just juking out to the side. All the little mind games you can do, such as faking breaking pallets by revving your chainsaw and trying to bait the survivor into running away so you can hit them, these can all be avoided if you're just aware that they exist. If you know that that's a thing that Billy players try to do, you can look for it and not get baited by it and just not leave the pallet. Basically, everything that's in Billy's kit that try to bait you into making mistakes can be avoided if you know what you're doing. But at the same time, Billy has so many things like that, and he can kind of just keep throwing them at you, and it's just constant interaction between you and the killer. There's no boring, stale gameplay of just, oh, I win because my power just makes you unable to do anything, or vice versa, where a killer's too weak, and it's just the survivor runs around, and the killer can do nothing but break pallets over and over again. There's a healthy balance of, equal chance on both sides in the chase. There is a large percentage of the player base of Dead by Daylight, especially people that have been playing the game for a long period of time, that mostly have fun in this game from the chases. The chase is what makes the game enjoyable. Being able to outplay each other mid-chase, whether you're a survivor or a killer, is what makes the game so exciting, right? Actually looping a killer in a spot where it's equal chance of them catching you and you looping them and being able to outplay them consistently in that spot is such a good feeling. And even for me as a killer, it's so much more fulfilling to catch a survivor when I know that they had an equal chance to outplay me, as opposed to playing someone like Spirit and just standing still and having them vault into me because they have no idea what I'm doing. This is where a lot of the fun of the game comes in, and this is a big reason why so many people play the game and dump so many crazy amounts of hours into it. I would say it's a big reason why DBD is even as successful as it is. So when you have killers that kind of just take away that entire fun aspect of the game, it becomes a major problem that needs to be addressed. As a matter of fact, I would say that a very similar situation has already happened in the game. Freddy, before his rework, used to have a major issue where his anti-stealth potential was pretty much outrageous. New players that rely on stealth were basically unable to play the game because Freddy's would put them to sleep and then see their auras outside of his terror radius and they can never escape him. This kind of killed stealth gameplay for the people that enjoy stealth, and vice versa, these killers are killing chase gameplay for the people who don't like stealth and instead like chase. I think there needs to be a healthy balance of both. As far as recommendations on what to do to fix this, I'm honestly not 100% sure. I wish I had just a 100% great idea that has no holes in it, but everything I think of seems to have holes in it, and it's a very difficult thing to tackle. For instance, off the top of my head, I can say that Pyramid Head could use either a slowdown after he picks his sword up out of the ground, or possibly a cooldown period of 3 seconds after he picks his sword up where he can't attack, similar to Huntress whenever she puts away her hatchet. But then some killers like Detzlinger are a little bit more complicated to fix, because how do you fix that? The ability to instant ADS and then shoot a projectile that goes as fast as a fully wound hatchet is just always going to be insanely strong. That's always going to be way too strong. So what you would have to do with him is maybe make him 4.6 and then give him like a wind up to his ADS. Maybe like make it like Huntress, where it takes like a full second to ADS and the survivor can get a warning and start juking. But then give him 4.6 and probably a bigger tear radius to compensate. But even that is like, there's a lot of holes into that, right? Like there's a lot of reasons why that might not work. That might be too strong or not strong enough. And it's tough to come up with a good solution. And hell, you can look at Spirit and Doctor as well. I have no idea how to make their powers work in a way that isn't oppressive and is instead fun. I feel like Spirit would almost certainly need a ground up rework to do something entirely different, and Doctor would need a change that is something that maybe my creative brain just can't come up with, because the only things I can think of would either make him way too oppressive or just completely terrible. I'll be 100% honest with you guys, I'm not the best creative mind. I'm not very good at coming up with new things and, you know, having them work in a way. I do not envy the designers of Dead by Daylight. It sounds like a terribly hard job. So I really can't give people the answers here of exactly how this should be fixed. I just know that it's definitely an issue, and like I said before, I'm just really worried about the actual health of the game. I'm like legitimately concerned about Dead by Daylight's future if things like this keep happening. I'm really worried that people might end up just quitting the game because of the game not being fun anymore. I will say the one thing that I do know, though, is that it seems to me like the killers that seem to do okay the most in a way that's healthy are the killers that have mobility. I feel like that is the big issue that every killer seems to have in this game, is mobility. The ability for survivors to just hold W and run to the other side of the map from their teammates and let them do gens in peace. Even if they die, the killer just takes so long to run down there, hook them, run the whole way across the map. It seems like mobility is always the big issue as far as why killers can never do well in a game. So my one suggestion, although it's not a very realistic one because it requires a lot of work on behavior's part, but I would love to see something done where all killers get some form of mobility outside of chase, where they can actually traverse the map in a decent way and maybe even like catch up to survivors that get a lot of initial chase distance instead of having to hold W for 30 whole seconds just to get close. And to compensate for that, maybe tone down on some of these powers that are insanely strong in chase and make it like basically impossible to counteract them in any way. Because that way you can get more chases and the chases will actually be fun, as opposed to trucking around the map and holding W half the time, but then when you do find a survivor, downing them without them having any say in the matter. This might need to be introduced as like a baseline mechanic, kind of like Bloodlust or something. I don't really know 100% how it could be done. Again, I'm not like creative enough or smart enough to really give an exact solution. I just know for a fact that every killer that I've seen that is like reasonably strong and still fun to play as and against always has a lot of mobility, but is also fair in chase. And I don't like the idea of all these killers that are very slow and immobile, but are just completely oppressive whenever they get close to you. It just doesn't lead to very fun gameplay. I'm not really exactly sure what I'm trying to get across with this video. I don't really expect this video to change anything. I kind of just wanted to get my thoughts out there and see what other people thought about it. So if you guys want, please do me a favor and leave me a comment below with anything that you might have to say about this video, whether you agree with me, you don't agree with me. If you guys have suggestions for things they can do that can make killers less oppressive and more fun, but still keep them powerful. I think that's really, really important to like repeat, is that I don't want killers to be weak. Trust me, I play mostly killer, and I want killers to be powerful and able to kill. I just want them to do it in a way that's fair and fun. So if you guys have any ideas, any suggestions, anything that you want to say, please let me know in the comments below. I'm very curious to hear people's thoughts on this. Remember to leave this video a like if you guys liked it as well. Also, feel free to sub because I am uploading every other day on YouTube. I'm going to be trying to do this as much as I can. I have been really enjoying the YouTube grind lately, and I really appreciate all the love and support I've been getting on my videos. So thank you guys so much. I'm also live every night except for Saturday, 6 nights a week. I'm live on twitch.tv/OhTofu, so feel free to stop by over there sometime and say hi as well. We have a lot of discussions about the game as well as just kind of hanging out and having a good time, so feel free to stop by over there as well. And thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, leave me your thoughts, and I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your night. I'm getting out of here. See ya. Take care. See ya. I'm out of here. See ya. I'll see you later. See ya.